Got it. All right, welcome. So this is the Difference Maker Time and Project Management workshop. And we got Holly here and myself, and Brenda Evans is our director. And what I'd like to do is just kind of go over the agenda briefly. Then I'm basically going to run this like one of my classes. So hopefully I can keep you engaged. These slides are a little more wordy than I'd like them to be, but I think just to kind of get the topics out, it was important. So we're going to go talk. I sent an email last week about Techstars Demo Day, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Basically, the potential for Difference Maker getting class credit if it's not available to you, you haven't thought about it. Talk about the mentor program. Then I'm going to go over available time for your team members, how to have good meetings, project management, Kanban and Gantt charts, a project plan, and then Holly's going to go over the budgeting project plan. So Techstars is anyone familiar with Techstars? It's very much like what Difference Maker is, but instead of it's called an accelerator. So what they'll do is they'll take you for 3 months and they'll really help you take your minimum viable product and go potentially much further with it. One of the disadvantages is they do take, at least initially, they'll take 6%. They'll give you $20,000 and they'll give you they're going to take 6% equity of common stock in your company. And depending on how things progress, they may actually take more. So, but there's going to be a demo day, just like we had, where their recent teams, I was going to say students, but their recent teams who are all over the country are all going to be in Boston. I think they actually came to Boston for the accelerator, and they're going to be presenting just much like you presented a couple of weeks ago, their demo day, and they're going to be looking for mentors and what have you, but it's a great place to network. And I think for Minds with Purpose, Jay, I think there's actually a company potentially doing something similar, but not exactly what you're doing. So it might be something you should consider, but everyone should consider going. It's really a good opportunity to network. Some of those people resources you need, there's going to be students there from other colleges too. And it might be a good place to network them. And there might be professionals there as well. I highly recommend it. So I'm working with the Manning School of Business because there's some students from there going also to try to have sort of everybody coordinate in different ways, but it's going to be on August 10th. I intend on going. It's going to be from 9:30 to noon. It's going to be at the House of Blues in Boston, which is not too far from Fenway Park. And these are going to be the companies presenting, and that's all in the email. You should have received the email. If you didn't, please let me know, and we'll go from there. So one of the things I've talked about is trying to get possible class credit. Now, one of the great things about the honors college is they're already doing this. I've also reached out to some of the faculty fellows, and we have definitely 2 college faculty fellows interested in trying to help with this. We're also looking at potentially one class that this could be used for. Does anybody, if you have any interest in getting credit as a class for this, please let me know, because I've already talked to the fellows. I do have some interest, and we have some ways of potentially making this happen. So I would say other than the exception would be the honors college, because they're already doing this. So.
Dave, can I chime in quickly?
No, you can't. Yes, you can.
I was just going to say, for the students, the whole point into trying to do this and the goal is to help you all pursue your ideas and not necessarily add a lot of extra work to your plate. So that's sort of like the goal behind this. If you're interested in getting involved, you'll get credit, and then you can also work on your Difference Maker project.
Yeah, no, thank you, Holly. Oops, go ahead.
I have a question. Could this be possibly used for an extracurricular, instead of taking an art class or humanities, I would use this as credit?
I would say this probably could be a free elective. So is that what you're asking, Mark?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think it could end up being, because I know there's a class in the business school that potentially this could be one of the avenues we use. Otherwise, I would suggest it could be like an independent study in your department, and that could count as your free elective, because I think a free elective is anything you want anywhere in any department. Is that accurate, Holly or Kevin?
I'd say that sounds correct.
All right.
And depending on the college, we can always check. So Mark, if you're a part of engineering and then you email Dave and say, yes, this is something I'm interested in, we can figure out basically how to make that happen.
Yeah, and that's exactly what my intention is, Mark, is sort of the free elective piece, because that's just anything, anything you want. I know like one team I think is actually doing this as their capstone project. So that's another possibility. So are there any other questions? All right, and this is what I try to do in my class, basically, is try to kind of give announcements at the beginning. All right, so the mentor team. So a few teams have not submitted their mentor needs survey. Now, you don't have to have mentors, but we highly recommend it. And many mentors are they're really enthusiastic and happy to help. So please get those done by Friday by 5 p.m. We also want to try to have multiple mentors per team, which we did last semester, and it seems to work well. I know myself, I remember when I first started volunteering at the university, I was a mentor in the electrical engineering program. Me and this other mentor, we were at the first meeting, and then the other mentor, we never saw them again. So sometimes it's good to have multiple mentors in case something happens and the other person's not unable to continue for whatever reason. But I think the big reason to have multiple mentors is the fact that you have sort of your business goals, and then you have your offering, whether it's a product or a service, those goals. And you really want to think about both. That's one of the things I really want to emphasize today, because I know we have one team that they received their funds and all they did was really work on their offering and their service or their product. So they didn't actually try to develop the business model around it, which I think is it's a disadvantage for them. So we're gonna have when we get the mentors, we're gonna have a first team meeting. And what we're gonna do there is I'm gonna go over the concept of a team contract. Now, most of you if you have teams, you probably are working fairly well together, but if you bring on new members or even the team members you have, you might want to do this. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, where the team contract in a moment, but you also going to want to determine 3 to 5 goals. Now, I asked you that in your mentor survey, which I've got from many of you. But here's the interesting thing. You want to determine the amount of time that each member is going to be able to work on the difference maker project per week. All right, and I'll go into that a little bit further. And if using mentors in this meeting, you're going to review the team expectations and responsibilities documentation. So essentially, we have these contracts or forms, I guess you would say, for the mentors and for the teams. And during that meeting, we'll go over those forms, and then everyone will sign them. So the team contract. All right. So one of the things you want to talk about in the team contract is the team structure. So for example, leadership, decision-making policies, keeping track of meeting notes. So those are minutes, regular meeting schedule. One of the things I want to do at that first meeting also is kind of schedule all your meetings for the semester. Typically what we've done is gone from meeting, and then once that meeting's done, we'd schedule the following meeting. But what ends up happening is people's calendars get filled up and it's really hard to find those successive meetings. So planning them all at the beginning of the semester, I think, is really the way to go. And we actually did that in the spring, and it made teams, I think, meet much more successful. So the procedures, how to keep the agenda during the meeting, the method of record keeping, when team members are absent, what do you do? You're going to talk about personal accountability, such as team participation, strategies to ensure cooperation and equal distribution of work, strategies to encourage and include ideas from all members, and to keep on task. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this project management, is try to keep on task. So knowing your goals and what the end result you're expecting is will really help a lot. And basically the expected attendance, punctuality, participation. And we all understand we have different schedules, so you'll expect different things from different members based on their level of personal outside responsibilities and the work that's expected of them at the team. And the commitment to the team. And then consequences of breach of contract. So what happens if somebody misses meetings, somebody doesn't do their work? Do they have to like take everyone out to lunch or something? Or do they have to do more work for the next project? And if you know people's schedules ahead of time, you can compensate for all these things. So as far as team structure, though, I'd just like to talk about this concept of an organizational chart. And this is a suggested organizational chart where sort of you have your DM team leader. And I want you to notice something when I'm done here, and I'll actually mention it at the end. Your DM team leader, then you might have a business leader and a technical leader. And these could end up being, one of these could be the same, or they all three could be the same. And each will have team members, but I want you to notice sort of under the team leader in a supporting role, you have your team members, but you have the difference maker staff, your mentors, the university resources, and external resources like E4All. So we're at the bottom to support you, not it's just we're there for you. There's a restaurant chain called the Niche Restaurant Group out of the Worcester area, and they have like 3 or 4 restaurants. And the CEO spoke. He's a university alumni, and he basically turns this upside down, where it's an upside down triangle where he's at the bottom and he supports everybody up top. And I think that's the real way to think about leadership. Is everybody, if everybody's successful, they're going to make you successful. And so we talked about the 3 to 5 goals. So you have your team mentor needs survey that was in there. But remember, think about the organizational and business goals, the product and service development goals, and use this to develop your project plan. And this is different than the budgeting project plan. And then the task required for each goal, and then the concept of scope. Does anybody know what the concept of scope is? Has anyone ever heard that? It's not the mouthwash. So essentially, scope is what you're going to do in that goal, what you're going to do in that task. You want to define it. You're going to say, okay, we're going to do these 5 tasks, or this is going to be involved in this part. In the computer networking world, we have things called requests for comments, RFCs, and they define how like the internet works and all the different pieces of the internet. The reason I mentioned that is if I'm going to make a device that's going to access the internet, I have to obey those rules. That can be part of my scope. I can support certain RFCs. But in your cases, depending on your product or services, you'll have to say, this is my scope. Much like when with ThermoExo during our meetings, our workshops, where you would talk about doing the kind of handling large business buildings as opposed to homes. That's sort of a scope concept. We're only going to do homes at first. We're only going to do businesses at first. That's part of your scope. The other piece, could be, we're going to, with Amara, sort of, we're going to do the sort of have the influencers come to our website to bring their followers as sort of a way of driving business to your offering. So those are all pieces. Instead of saying we're going to do everything for everybody all the time, I hear that a lot as a business professor. I hear we're going to make it for everybody needs our product, and no, they don't necessarily. But that's when you think about your goals. I also want you to think in terms of what is this going to offer, and I can't emphasize that enough. But other than and here's sort of the whole complete part here: goals, scope, the tasks, the resources needed, the success requirements. What's going to make this goal? How do I know I'm successful? So Mark, in your case, you talked about the military as your team talked about the military as a new customer base instead of just the athletic coaches, right? So if you get so many of one customer, like the military, is that going to be success? So you have to figure out what does success for this goal mean. And it doesn't have to be, it could be, hey, we got our first minimum viable product, version 2 done. That could be your goal. It doesn't have to be a huge giant goal, but you have to have something to let you know what success is. And then you have to think about who's going to work on each goal. And that's very important, because if you don't know and this is going to help with time management. So I'll talk about that in a minute, but it also has to do with the person's expertise, their willingness to learn, their background, things of that. Those will help in determining who does that, and then you can do the time. So the time available. So one of the things you're going to need to do is determine how many hours per week each team member is available, and discuss the team commitment relative to other responsibilities. How many people, difference maker is your only thing that you're working on? Okay, this is what I expected. I didn't expect to see one hand raised. And that's appropriate, because everybody has all these other things. You have family things that you work with, classes, extracurricular activities, sports, clubs, jobs. So you have to figure out how much time you can sacrifice. And then some team members may be busy at certain times. Like maybe for like September, one team member has 20 hours a week available. And then come October, they only have 4 hours a week available. Try to think about that when you're scheduling tasks. because that'll determine basically how much time they can work. And then realize, okay, well, they work 20 hours a week here, and maybe you can consistently work 10 hours a week that whole time. So your schedule is a bit different, but be understanding around that, as long as they're, and I would suggest, enthusiastic and ambitious and putting their effort in. Because there's nothing more difficult than when you have a team member that maybe isn't putting their all. So I got some math up here. I know some of this may, may be a little intimidating, but it's really not that bad. So what you want to do is you want to think in terms of weeks, okay? So we talk about duration of task in week. You think about how many hours the task is going to take. And then you take the hours for team member 1 per week that they can work, team member 2, to however many team members are going to work on this. And then basically you divide the two, and that'll tell you how many weeks it's going to take to complete that task. Now, one of the things is you're like, well, I don't have any idea how long a task is going to take to complete. That's something your mentors can help with. And it's also something you learn over experience, because the first time you do some task, you might be, okay, we're going to think it's going to take 30 hours. Or in this case, we'll continue with the example for a minute here. So we talk about a task taking 45 hours. Team member 1 can contribute 10 hours a week. Team member 2, 5 hours a week. So the duration would be 45 total hours of the task divided by 10 plus 5, 15. So that task would take 3 weeks to complete. So, and then you want to think about this for all your different tasks. But again, you don't necessarily at the beginning, when you start this process, you're just going to be guessing at some points. Your mentors will give you some advice. We think it's going to take this long. And then you'll just develop these skills. And the more you do certain tasks, then you'll realize, I know this is going to take 25 hours, 35 hours, 10 hours, whatever it is. That just comes with experience and time. So, and then you can make a big old table like this. And I actually have this table if anybody wants it. I can post it. I didn't post it in. I'm going to share a link with everybody after. But essentially, it's not as bad as it looks. So you look at the team members, total hours scheduled per week for each team member. And this is the total available team hours per week, 25. And then you look at different tasks. And we have no idea. These are just tasks, just generic names. So task 1 is going to take 50 hours. Task 2 is 20 hours, 3, 30, and 4 is 25. Then you take each team member and you allocate time based on the tasks that need to be done. So team member 1 would work on task 1 for 5 hours, and that's all they'll be doing. Team member 2 is 10 hours, so we have them working on 3 tasks. Team member 3, just 1, and team member 4, 2 tasks. Does this make sense? I know it's a big table, but the idea, I just want you to understand. So then what you have is, now we know that every week, 10 hours, everybody's going to be working 10 hours a week on task 1, 5 hours a week on task 2, 5 on task 3, and on 4. And then at the bottom here, this is how many weeks it's going to take to complete each task. And a lot of time management tools and project management tools will help with this type of stuff. But I just want you to start thinking in terms of the concept of people hours. So essentially, we have 10 people hours for task 1, 5 for 2, 3, and 4 per week. And it's how many everybody's able to do. And then you'll look at the priority. That may change how you allocate work based on the priority of people based on a task needing to be done sooner than others. So here's what they call an EISENHOWER matrix. So this is a basic concept of the impact that work is going to have versus the effort. And so low impact, which means it's important, but no, it's not really interesting. It's not something you're going to send a press release or you're going to maybe put on your website type of thing, but it needs to be done. So it's low effort, low impact. But then you have stuff that could be low impact, but high effort. And that's a thankless task. Again, something you're not necessarily going to post online to say, we just did this. It could all be in the back end just to make things look really interesting and work really well, but nobody ever really sees it. And then the major projects that you're going to be like, once it's done, sending out a press release, letting everybody know, telling everybody we just completed this, things that can potentially help you really move forward through marketing and just implementation. Any questions? Any questions so far? If you have any questions, feel free to just say, hey, Dave, I got a question. So, and this is, and what you'll do is when you're putting your task, you'll say, oh, this is, you could make a board, or you could do this online, and you could take a sticky note and, oh, that's a major project. That's a thankless task. That's a fill-in. That's a quick win. Things of that nature. Oh, and a quick win is when it's really easy and it's really, something you can share with everybody. So meetings, and this is so part of what I'm talking about today is if you're doing this for credit and you already aren't in an established program that you're doing this for credit, I want to provide the people in those departments these tools to sort of give them a framework to grade you. But if you're not doing it for credit through if you're doing it for credit through your colleges already, don't worry. This stuff is really helpful and I really suggest you do it. But the thing I want to emphasize is this part with the mentor meetings, this is definitely required, the formal meeting part. So essentially before the meeting, you'd schedule it, but if you already have it scheduled, not as big a deal, but you're going to determine an agenda. If you have previous meeting notes, use these to help with your agenda topics. Send the agenda 4 to 7 days before the next meeting. And during the meeting, make sure the team follows the items on the agenda. And then focus on those topics, remain focused because it's really easy to get out of focus. And take notes or what they call meeting minutes, and then schedule the next meeting if not properly scheduled. And then after the meeting, clean up the notes if they're not already, because a lot of times I take notes and they're kind of messy just because I'm paying attention to the meeting and I'm trying to record things. But after that, send them as soon as possible. Then every meeting you want to repeat this. Send out the agenda, follow the meeting agenda, send out the meeting minutes when you're done. Because this helps everybody stay on track. And then there's also one of the things I'd like to introduce is a concept of a Scrum meeting. And this is more informal, typically in industry. So it can be in person or Zoom. All these meetings can be in person on Zoom, or they can be hybrid where there's a couple of people meeting and then some are on Zoom. But a Scrum meeting is like 15 to 30 minutes. Typically, what each member does is they provide a brief status. They discuss if they're having difficulties and if they're able to help somebody else. And that's really all a Scrum meeting is. In industry, you typically do this every day. It should only be 15 minutes to 30 minutes. We suggest you stand up. Can anybody suggest, if you don't know the answer, because I told you, does anybody know why you stand up? So hold on, I might be missing someone, I think. Okay, so essentially you stand up so the meeting isn't long. Because if everybody's standing up, they're going to be like, all right, we've been here for a half hour. We don't want to. If you sit down, I actually worked at a company where they said we had Scrum meetings and they were like an hour and 20 minutes a day. And I'm like, this isn't a Scrum meeting. I just couldn't. That's all I could think to myself. This isn't a Scrum meeting. This is a meeting every day. And but this is so what I'm suggesting for the difference maker teams, and we actually had a team doing this without knowing that they were doing this. They were meeting twice a week, just by chance. It seemed to really help them out. So I'm suggesting that teams should implement this 2 to 3 times a week, always at scheduled regular times. And it can be whenever everyone's available. It doesn't need to have the mentors. It can just be the team. Literally 15 minutes to a half hour. How you doing? Are you stuck? What can I do to help you unstuck? And this is a really important concept. And if you've ever heard of Agile Scrum, this is sort of a subset of the Agile framework. And project management. So projects are structured like improv. So one of the things that I don't talk about in Difference Maker too much is I actually graduated from an improv class called a place called the Improv Asylum in Boston. So if you've all wondered, yes, I've actually, so I was like class number 5. But one of the things I learned about through improv is sort of just running with things and trying to make it work. And this happens to a lot of people where, and it kind of trains you. So it's improv is really a structure. So you can rehearse, because people are like, how do you rehearse improv? Because it's on the cuff. What you do is rehearse the structures. You exercise your brain. And it's really a great tool. And I was really happy I took it. And it basically uses this thing called yes and notation. So if I were to say to someone, look, there's a UFO up there, and they said, no, there isn't. There's nothing, I can't work with that. because essentially they might say, oh yeah, I see the UFO. And then we kind of build upon that. And I'd say, I can't believe how big it is. And they'd be like, yeah, look at all the lights. And we could have built upon that as we go. So, and project management's a lot like that, because you're really just working with a structure, because all the things you're doing, people have done in some ways, but not exactly what you're doing. And as you go, you're going to be like, oh, what about this? And what about this? And we're going to change things as you move along. So one definition I really liked from an article, and it's actually, I have all the sources and the notes, but improvisation is the ability to react to the situation on a dime, making use of what you have available. And I think that's really important. And in entrepreneurship, there are several structures. So understanding your customer needs using secondary market research and primary market research. And then determining a problem, then developing a solution and testing it with your customers. So I'm going to show a short video of a late night show where they ran into a situation. And I think I just found this video yesterday. I thought it was kind of interesting. All right, let's see. So just going to wait for the little play button. There we go. I'm only going to show a couple of minutes. So. Oh, can everyone hear? All right, hold on. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I got to share back with the audio. All right. All right, let's try this. Is everyone here
Welcome
now?
back, everybody.
Awesome.
Welcome back to the big Friday night show. Oh, yeah. Craig, we've noticed a false sense of enthusiasm in your oh, yeah there. What's going on? Well, I'll tell you. My first guest tonight was going to be Sean William Scott. He's very, you've seen him in the movies. He's funny in the American Pie movies and all that stuff. He's fantastic. He's Stifler in the American Pie. He's hilarious. He's lovely. He's good looking. He's handy. He's not here. I know, who would have thought the traffic in LA would be so bad at 12:30 at night? But he's not here. He's just going out. He's stuck in traffic. We can't hang around here. We have to be out of here by 1:30 in your region or whatever. So what happens is usually when we have a big movie star on the show, or anybody really on the show, what happens is that there's a member of staff here who's designated to that person. They find out about them, they Google them, they find out what they do, and then when they get here, they look after them, they show them where the bathroom is, and then they show them around. So I figured, well, we'll talk to that person then. The person that was meant to get Sean William Scott here on time. Segment producer Lisa Ammerman, everybody. Lisa. Welcome, Lisa. Funny old day, isn't it? Funny old day today. So what happened to Sean William Scott then?
He has been stuck in traffic for over 2 hours.
Good Lord.
Coming in from Malibu, and he's literally...
Where all the stars live.
And he and his mom have been trying to navigate through all the different places. They are just stuck.
Oh, well, that's terribly tragic. Well, look, show business, life has to go on. I will ask you the questions I was about to ask Sean William Scott. All right? You'll be good. I'm sorry.
All right, so I really like this video because, I mean, this is television, late night television. All the advertisers pay a lot of money. They're expecting this big star, as you can see. So they just rolled with it, and she starts answering questions. And it's really kind of funny, but I just think this is a really good example of having to pivot. And okay, this wasn't expected, so this is what we're going to do. And it affects a couple of people. It affects him as the host, but it also affected the person who does all the work. So I hope you enjoyed that example. I really thought it was good. So, project is a sequence of tasks needing to be completed to attain a certain outcome. All projects are typically a temporary endeavor that will have a beginning and end, completed with certain boundaries and constraints. And depending on the complexity, it can be managed by a single person or hundreds. So typically in a company like you'll have a project manager. I used to work on with project managers in a lot of my different roles, and I would go to a meeting, and I was a software test engineer or as a customer support engineer. And I would go to a meeting and I'd be working with engineering. I'd be working with marketing. I'd be working with, if I was in support, testing, and if I was in testing, I'd be working with support and development and hardware engineering, what have you. But I want you to think about 3 features when you're creating something new: the scope, which is the features and functionality of your offering, your timeline, your schedule, and your allocated resources. So your budget, the people, the tools, and the supporting framework, and any other resources that you might have. And this is really important to think about these things whenever you're doing these different steps, because I think it really helps you kind of stay focused. But part of what I want you to also think about is your stakeholders. And basically that's anyone who has a vested interest in your company and can either affect the outcome of the business and the operations of the performance. But typically you have investors, employees, customers, suppliers, governments, trade associations, consumers, communities. But there's also difference maker team stakeholders that are a little bit different than this. All the above are part of that, but you also have the donors who are stakeholders in an indirect way. And the mentors and your volunteers are stakeholders because they really are vested. They really care about your success. So they're also part of this. And the volunteers and the difference maker team and the university, we're also stakeholders in an indirect way because we really want to see you successful, because we're here to make you successful, and that's part of our roles in this endeavor. So I want to talk about sort of the boards now, ways you can organize things. And I'm actually looking at, I think, a online tool called Monday.com. I'm still evaluating it, which will integrate some of these techniques. So there's a thing called a Kanban board. It can be an online one or it can be a physical board. And essentially what you do is you put your tasks in your rows, and then your columns, you have sort of different states. Typically a Kanban board, the very basic one is to do, doing, and done. But I like to add the waiting one because a lot of times we might be waiting for things in order to complete them. So you can take a task and you can say, oh, task 1 right now, it's in the to-do column. We're not doing anything with it yet. Task 2, we're done. Task 3, I'm still waiting for so-and-so to get an email back to me or get me some information. And then doing, so we're currently working on this. And then you could even have sticky notes where if you were to do this on paper, where you'd say like, oh, Dave's doing this right now, or Holly's waiting on this information, that type of thing. And you can add columns as needed. And remember, each row is a separate task. That's the important thing. And then we have, so I'm going to show this video before I show the Gantt chart. This is a short video, but it's about making teddy bears in Vermont. And I'm actually going to probably speed it up a little bit.
Vermont Teddy Bear is based in Shelburne, but because the company specializes in direct-to-consumer sales, they're focused on making products that people all around the U.S. want to buy.
I'm not interested in selling $9.99 plush. I'm interested in selling a premium product that's handmade in Vermont to consumers that buy from all over the country.
Their factory tours feature a fantasy assembly line and a teddy bear hospital that shows off the product's lifetime guarantee. But the actual process takes 13 or more production staff, many of them new Americans, to assemble about 500 teddy bears a day. First, a worker cuts out pieces of fabric that will become the bear's body parts. She uses a die and a press to cut through multiple layers of fur at once. Those pieces move on to a team of stitchers who use sewing machines to build each body part. Because the parts are unique to each size and shape of bear, the company can't use any automated sewing. Each part is stitched manually. The head is the most complicated. Workers attach the ears and eyes to each head one by one, which the company says makes every bear's face a little unique. The workers turn each body part inside out. Then they head to the stuffing room. Each part gets individually stuffed with a plastic filling made from recycled water bottles. The plastic arrives at the factory in 650-pound bales. Workers load the filling into a machine that shreds it into loose fibers and feeds into the stuffing machines on the other side of the wall. The company estimates that about 28 recycled water bottles go into filling each bear. The bear parts head back to the assembly area, where workers install wooden hinges that let the bear's arms and legs rotate. They use a custom-built machine to attach the joints to the bear's body. The bear heads back to the stuffing room, where workers fill its body. Then its final stitches are made by hand.
Stitching, sewing has become lost in our society. I had to take home economics to be able to graduate from high school. That's not a requirement anymore. My mom and dad would drop me off at my grandmother's house for the summer on Lake Dunmore, and on rainy days, we'd stitch quilts.
The company brings the same techniques to the pricey clothes and accessories that let customers personalize their bears. They also make special edition bears with nearly every accessory made by hand. This year, they'll make 35 of their annual holiday bear, which retails for $599. You can buy bears at the factory, but the company's focus has always been direct sales.
Using radio, TV, catalogs, now social media, digital media, to have a one-on-one connection to the consumer and doing it one at a time.
Radio marketing has been a major part of that formula since the company was founded in the early 1980s.
If you put a radio spot out on a commute time in a metropolitan area, the phone rings, literally. Like we have people with headsets on ready to take the call.
Now online sales and social media play more of a role, but the company is still focused on reaching customers whenever they want to mark special occasions.
And that's why you got to always have a uniquely different bear, because once you bought one, why would I come back and buy another? You know, I got engaged, so I got an engaged or a wedding bear, right? That's one. My first Valentine's Day with my wife, there's another. My first grandchild, there's another. So if you don't have that topically, 7 million people celebrate their birthday every week. You better have a good birthday bear, and we do.
So the reason I show that, you get a little bit of business strategy, but you also get to see a process. And the reason I wanted to show you that process is basically, here's a copy of a Gantt chart. And you can type this in Excel and you can get sort of a generic Gantt chart, but it's not necessarily dynamic because you'd have to, it's basically an Excel spreadsheet with some creative aspects to it. But you'll see, so it talks about cutting fur, sewing and stuffing the fur, and then all the green here, all this is completed tasks, and this is stuff that needs to be done. So these are like your steps. These could also be dates. But then what I want you to notice is while they're cutting the fur and they're building the bear, they can also cut material for the clothing, which can be done at the same time. All right, and then you have to sew the clothes, and that's like another process. And these are dependent on each other. And I want you to think about dependencies when you think about tasks, because sometimes one task can be dependent on another. And then you can also have separate tasks that are going along at the same time being done by different people. So this is just a way to think about this. And then embroidered the t-shirt. Again, this is all successive tasks. These are all this is dependent on this, and that's dependent on that. Same here. And then if you cut accessories and you sew them, that's done here. Now you'll notice over here we have dress the bears. This is dependent on all these other tasks being done. And being the gating factor is really building the bear, which takes the longest. Once that's done, you can dress the bear, you can package it, and you can ship it. So this is a very simple Gantt chart, but I feel like showing you the video, kind of, you get to see what's going on rather than just me saying, oh, cut, sew the bear. I mean, now you actually saw it, you understand it. This is a manufacturing process, but you can apply this to this technique to any process that you're doing. And I suggest that you do this when you're managing your projects, all your difference maker projects. So the project plan, so these are sort of the tentative pieces. And again, this would be more rigid for those students who are taking this for credit, who haven't necessarily, they don't have any structure for that process right now for that class. But if you're doing it and they have a class structure, you do what they say. But ultimately, I think this is really going to be the most beneficial project plan for you. And this is different than the budgeting project plan. This is really your procedures, what you're gonna do, when you're gonna do it type plan. The first part would be your idea plan. Then I want you to think about your stakeholders, but most importantly, your project timeline, which really is dependent. I shouldn't say most importantly, but it's really going to depend on this, because if your idea plan or your stakeholders change, more the customer aspect of your stakeholders, or maybe even the mentor you get, because that could maybe guide you and say, oh, we couldn't do that now, but we have this mentor that can help us. Now we can do this. So that could change, all those pieces could change your project timeline, because you may choose to do things or change how you do things based on those resources you get. And then you want to have results at the end of this plan, like, hey, this is what we started out doing. This is how we had a pivot. These are some of the issues that we found. and how we've been able to move forward. And basically, that's my presentation. Here's our contact. So if does anybody have any questions for me around project management? And if you have any questions offline, we can certainly go into things more in depth offline if you find some of these tools and you're asking me. But I intend to do more research on Monday.com because they will offer it free for students. But if we do that, I'd like to be a little bit more involved so I can kind of see and guide you as needed. So Holly, if I don't think I see any questions, but if anybody does, all right, awesome. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. That was awesome.
Thank you.
All
I'll
right,
stop
so-
sharing.
Yeah, I should be able to share. So if anyone has any questions, definitely feel free to email Dave or myself. And then you can always chat in questions or just definitely feel free to interrupt. So the last like 10, 15 minutes, we're just going to sort of go over next steps. So next steps that Dave had mentioned is mentor program. So if you want mentors, you want to be a part of the program, make sure that you complete the survey by the 29th. And then from there, Dave will reach out, match you with some mentors and get started with that process. The other thing that Dave is managing is patent hacks. So we had talked about patent hacks. So two things actually. Foley and Lardner should be getting back to me later today with the 3 teams that win one of their $5,000 prizes. So it's taken them a little longer than they expected, which is a good thing. It shows that you all really deserve the prize, but unfortunately there's only 3. So they did say they'll get back to me today. So hopefully within a few hours or by the end of the day, I'll send out an email with the 3 winners for that prize. But whether or not you get that prize, there's still patent hacks. So Dave's going to email you a free code to actually use patent hacks, which will help you get started with better understanding the whole patent process and getting started. So as far as next steps in funding, so you all successfully completed the boot camp, which is great. We know that it was a lot of work and time and effort. So we applaud you for putting all of that time and effort in. So as of now, you have all gained access to your funding. So whatever amount you won between, I think it was the $2,000 to $6,000 at the Idea Challenge, you should now have access to through the Student Affairs Engage page. If you think way back to the beginning of June, when Caitlin and Juan, who work in the budgeting office, they did a presentation on how to use the Engage page. You all should have received an email and information on how to log in and view how much you have in your Engage page. So before submitting anything you'd like to use your money for in Engage, Dave or myself, we just have to pre-approve it. The reasons for this is it's just going to speed up the process. So basically, you'll submit this template to me and Dave. We'll look through it. You'll basically highlight, here's specifically what we're interested in doing, or here's specifically what we'd like to submit and Engage, over the next week or 2. We'll look at it. We'll say, yep, this looks good. Please submit it. Or we'll say, have you thought about this? Or maybe you can do this instead. Or unfortunately, this isn't approved. So that just helps because once you put it into an Engage, we get an email basically, and then we have to approve it again. And then it goes through different processes to get approved and then to either get ordered or for payments to be sent out. So again, filling out the project plan, it goes along with Dave just presented, and then also goes along with just keeping the process very efficient and helping with all of the approvals. I emailed this out, I think about a week or 2 ago, just so you could all review it before this session. It's a very simple Excel sheet just to help keep you all on track. So very simple as far as summaries. There's actually an example down here for the first few rows. So basically for a summary, very high level, let's say you want to build a prototype. You think it's going to take you about 6 months. You're planning on starting in August. You're planning on ending in January. You think the total cost for your prototype is going to be $1,500. And then specifically, here's what we kind of want to do. So this is just sort of an example. And then you would break the holistic summary up into smaller base tasks. So in order to build a prototype, first you need to order materials. You think that ordering materials are going to take about a month because again, you have to complete the project plan, send it to me and Dave. We give you the pre-approval, then you submit it to Engage, then you get approval, then it goes through the budgeting process and they can actually order materials for you. Those materials then get shipped to UMass Lowell, and then you go and pick up those materials.
Holly, when you say the project plan, you mean the budgeting project plan, correct?
Yeah, so this is the budgeting project plan, yes. Yeah. So about a month. So you'd finish within August. The cost would maybe be about $500 for all of your parts. And then here are some of the parts that we'd like to purchase, for example. So again, just sort of an overview of what your summary is, and then specific tasks that will help you reach that summary with dates and just estimated costs. So that's what these first few rows are for. The next rows are more details as far as the specific things that you need. So let's say you're ordering materials. What company do you need to order the materials from? Let's say it's Amazon. What type of materials do you need? Is there a specific part or component? Is there a part or component number associated with that? What are you wanting to use it for? So if you're buying bolts, what are those bolts going to be used for example? And then always including the website link is really helpful because then we can click the link, we can look at it, we can approve it, and then you also include all of this information in Engage. Quantity, so do you need 1 bolt? Do you need 10 bolts? Price per item, so let's say 1 bolt is $1, but then you need 10 of them. So then that way you can get the total price. And then again, this just helps, and then any notes at the very, very end. So again, this just helps keep you on track as far as summaries, tasks, where do you see your project going over the next year? Just keep in mind too that funding does have to be used by June. So you'll be working very closely with me and Dave from now until June, submitting your project plan, getting the pre-approval, getting it into Engage. And then Juan and Caitlin sort of are working on the back end to help you actually spend that funding. I think that's about it here. Are there any questions regarding the project budget plan?
I actually have a question.
Yes.
So what if it's a monthly subscription cost? Like, so for example, Zoom or like AWS or stuff like that.
Yep, so you would still add that in here. So maybe the summary is just like subscription to help us with meetings. And then
Okay.
you could just put task, subscribing to Zoom. Here's the amount it's going to cost per month, and we need it for X amount of months. Here's the total. And then that way we can say, yep, that sounds good. And then you can just submit all of that information into Engage. And then Juan or Caitlin would most likely use a university card, a credit card, to actually pay that amount on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good question. Yeah.
Can you actually pay for like several months at a time, like and get a discount?
I don't know about that.
All right.
Are you asking me? I
Yeah.
thought you were asking me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I was asking you, Brandon.
I'm
Yeah, I
not
don't know
sure.
either.
Yeah.
And that's something that Juan and Caitlin will really help with too. So if you submit something and they figure out like, hey, once we click this link and we're going to order that if we pay 6 months in advance and you need all those 6 months and we can get a discount, they'll always do what's most efficient and will save you money. Same with materials. If you say, oh, you know, here's like all the information on Amazon, for example. But then as you might remember, and as written in the fund guide, UMass Lowell has pre-approved vendors. So they might know that a vendor can offer this at a less expensive price, for example. So they're really here to help with that. But definitely if you're ordering materials, just make sure you do look at that vendor list first, and that's in the fund guide. Other questions?
So Holly, and I think you might have alluded to this, but essentially, if they order stuff, with the process, it could take 2 or 3 weeks just to get the order even started.
Yeah, at least. I think the fund guide says to give us like 3 to 4 weeks in advance, because again, you have to submit the project plan to us, we have to approve it, then it has to go through Engage, then we have to approve it, and then it goes to the budgeting people to actually order, and then there's shipping time. So if you think like, hey, we need something next week, should have told us that 3 weeks ago, or you should have submitted 3 weeks ago, basically. So just try to give as much lead time as possible so we can make sure we can get you what you need in a timely manner.
What if like it's like an opportunity that happens like instantly, like for example, like if we invite us to like some sort of trade show and like, hey guys, we need you to be there next week. Like, how is there a way to like expedite that process?
So that's something we'd have to work with Juan and Caitlin on, because travel is even a longer process, because we have to submit travel authorizations for any faculty, staff, any students that basically are traveling on behalf of the university or with university funds. So traveling, definitely give as much notice as possible. And if it comes down to it, yeah, we'll try to figure it out. But at that point, the processes just sometimes take longer than expected. So you would just have to get approvals, authorizations, everything before you go. And then I did just want to share this. So this is the fund guide. So you should have all gotten this. So this is what Juan and Caitlin went over in the beginning of the boot camp. For those of you that may have won engineering funding, I think Tendrin might be the only one in here that won engineering funding, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So funding for that expires December 31st. And then funding for Difference Maker, so all of you, will expire on June 1st. This talks about the Engage page. So you just click this. That's how you can access your page. And here's what you can basically use funding for. So Mark, to your point, travel is a part of that. But then there's just different processes that go into that. Again, requests should be made 2 to 4 weeks in advance. And again, that will just help us get you everything in a timely manner. And then if you're ordering any materials, they have to be shipped to the UMass Lowell Student of Activities office, which is located in University Crossings. Once your items come in, you'll get an email, and then someone can go and pick those up. Reimbursements are not allowed, so that's just something else to keep in mind. If you purchase something and then you say, oh, here's my receipt, I need to be reimbursed. Unfortunately, that's not an option. So just make sure you keep that in mind, please. Contact info, the project plan that we just went over. So this is the budgeting project plan. The other thing I would like to point out is the Excel template that I showed to you all. It will change from now until June and even after that. So if you make changes to it, just save it and then just make sure that you're submitting a project plan to Dave and myself within every few months. So August, November, February, and May. And that will just help us stay up to date on what you're doing, things that have changed, upcoming things that you may be in need of. And Ariel, looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just have a quick question, Holly.
Yeah.
Let's say I order a very expensive GPU, right, to run things, software. And when I got the product, it's damaged. And we need to replace it or return it or something. How would this process look?
So Juan and Caitlin help with that. We have had that before where students submit, an item gets shipped or ordered and it's broken. And then if that's the case, you would just email Juan, Caitlin, copy me and Dave, and just say, hey, like we picked this thing up from University Crossings, you know, a couple days ago, we opened the package and the CD is broken or the software doesn't work or the materials aren't what we ordered, they shipped the wrong thing. And that's when Caitlin and Juan, they'll figure out how to return it, how to replace it, and they'll help with that whole process.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yep.
So like, what if we have, for example, like team members like in like a distant place and then they ship like a critical piece, like critical instruments. Like, how do we like get funding for them to ship stuff to us?
So as of now, everything has to be shipped to University Crossings at UMass Lowell.
No, I don't think you got what I'm saying. Like,
Okay.
so we have people like in California and they need to ship us something. Yes, they can ship us anytime, but like, how do we like, can we use the funding to like pay for the shipping company to ship their product to us?
So you're saying
their piece of technology that we need?
So you're saying there's like a company or people in California and you need something from them. And in order to get it, you have to pay the shipping costs for them to ship it to you.
Yeah.
So that's probably like a special kind of request. So that's something we'd have to email Caitlin and Juan about and maybe meet with them to figure out, can we do that? If so, how do we do that?
And Mark, if I can sort of ask a little question on top of that, is this a product that you've either already paid for or just something somebody is just shipping so you can try out their part, like as a, as a demo?
No, like
part?
we already like it's like part of our project and we already like talked with them. It's like been in plans for a while. We're just wondering if we could use the funds to help get it over to us.
So I'd probably say yes, because you can pay people for services, for example. So there's probably a way that Juan and Caitlin can get that person or that company's information, put them into the system as a vendor. And then whenever they ship the item, payment can go out for however much that item costs to ship. And then that way they'll receive the payment. But I don't deal with that part of it. So I don't know all the details. So again, that's something when the time comes, again, give us 2 to 4 weeks advance. And we can you can email Juan and Caitlin directly, copy me and Dave, or email me and Dave, and we can email them and copy you. And then we can meet with them and figure that out.
All right.
And then lastly, this is just the contracted vendors. So these are people that UMass Lowell has contracts with, and we can get supplies typically at better rates. So before looking elsewhere, you can always take a look at all of those companies. And then this is just sort of frequently asked questions and answers. Any other questions, comments? And again, Dave and I are here to support you through the whole process. So if a question comes up tomorrow, next week, just please reach out to us and we'll do our best to help you. And then Juan and Caitlin are awesome. They've been doing this they understand all of this. They've been doing it for a long time. So if we can't help you, they'll definitely be able to answer your questions. So mentor program, patent hacks, the full landlord enterprises, the project budget plan, the funding guide, and the engage page. So I think that's all I had on my list. So after this, Dave and I will compose an email because I know Dave has some additional helpful documents that will help you with project planning and time management. We'll also send you the Excel template again, the fund guide again, just so you have those to review. And then we can include some more information about next steps. We did record this video, so that should be available within a day or two. So we can also send this link to you so that you have it. And then the PowerPoint from today as well. Dave, anything else?
I think I'm good. I don't think I have anything I can add. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, any last questions or comments? Anything we can help with?
Yeah, I do have one. I just checked our engage page and it says our account balance is still 0.
Okay, it should have money in it. So I'm going to check with Juan and Caitlin on that.
Okay.
And if anyone else has that problem, I'm just going to email them holistically and just say, can you just double check the accounts? But if you run into any issues, yep, just email us and we can figure that out. Awesome.
All right, why did you email those instructions again? I just want to find them again, make sure I bookmark them.
For the fund guide?
Yeah.
Yep, yeah, we'll send another email with the fund guide and the budgeting project plan. Awesome. All right, well, thank you all for coming. And again, congrats on completing the entire boot camp. This was the last workshop, so congrats to you all. We're really excited to work with you and see what you can do from now until June, and even after that. We work with teams for many years, so congrats to you all.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
you're
Yes,
welcome.
thank you,
care,
Holly.
everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Dave.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.